This is an open letter. This is open letter number 1 for my new podcast, Open Letter to Ordinary Human Beings. It's less than 1,000 words. Open letter number 1 on behalf of the memory of Renee Nicole Good. This is an open letter to Jonathan E. Ross, the 43-year-old ICE officer who on Wednesday, the 7th of January, 2026, at 09:37 and 17 seconds Central Standard Time in Minneapolis, Minnesota, let go of the first of 3 live rounds from what is reported to be his Sig Sauer P320 9mm service pistol, which is typically loaded with the heavier 124 grain jacketed hollow points to increase lethality as opposed to the standard ammunition, which is 115 grain in weight. The muzzle velocity of a good round is at least 1,200 feet per second. I mentioned the ballistics here because it is the language that Officer Ross speaks. He could tell you that kind of ammunition penetrates ordnance gelatin within a range of 12 to 16 inches, which is important because it takes at least 15 inches to penetrate typical vehicle glass. So it's hard to get a good headshot at a suspect who is determined to murder you if they are using their vehicle as a deadly weapon and they are protected by their thick windshield. Technically, the ballistics and the limitations of the slow, heavy bullets law enforcement officers are required to use almost always justify letting go of multiple rounds at a moving vehicle. Law enforcement officers are usually required to carry ammunition that is designed not to go all the way through one suspect and into another person for self-evident safety reasons. Some law enforcement departments find novel ways to circumvent this well-intentioned limitation. I kept my old, slow, heavy 147 grain 9mm ammo when all patrolmen were offered to upgrade to 357 Magnum semi-automatic Sig Sauers that looked like a beautiful option. The 357 rounds zipped out at over 1,400 feet per second, which excited a lot of tactically minded police officers. However, I couldn't justify shelling out an extra $100 out of pocket for an increase of velocity from less than 1,000 feet per second. And although I was only involved in one police shooting in my 18 years as an ordinary beat cop in Dallas, Texas, I never let go of a round. I was extremely fortunate. The one shooting I was involved in, by the way, was textbook. A suspect wrestled a pistol away from a security guard and fired a round in a police garage. In fact, the same garage that Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963. 5 police officers, myself included, were flagged down by a janitor who had witnessed the assault on the security guard and flagged us down. We responded and took cover. The first officer to engage the suspect had the most experience and clearly yelled, "Dallas police, Dallas police. Drop your weapon, drop your weapon." That officer then fired twice. He struck the suspect with 2 headshots, and the suspect took his last breath in that garage. We checked on the security guard, who was down on the concrete floor of the garage the entire time during our engagement with the suspect. He was okay. We were all interviewed as witnesses by the shooting team from homicide, and we learned a lot from that tragic event. I think, Officer Roth, that you are a psychopath. And I do not mean this as an insult. I mean that as a way for one ordinary human being to communicate with another ordinary human being from a place of compassion. I think that you were dragged by a vehicle for 100 yards on Tuesday, the 17th of June, 2025, at approximately 8 in the morning, and you had to endure receiving 30 stitches. And I think you made a vow to yourself in which you said, in a hypnotic mantra, "Never again, never again, never again." And I think, Officer Ross, that there is a less than 0 chance that you had nightmares about being dragged by a vehicle. And I think those nightmares were sometimes blissfully blown away by daydreams of a sweet, clean headshot at any cocksucker who tried to murder you again while they hid behind the steering wheel of their killing machine. Never again, never again, never again. And Officer Ross, I want you to know that when I say that I think you are a psychopath, I do not say that for shock value at all. I say that as earnestly as I have ever told another human being anything, because I think it is important for all human beings to understand that psychopaths are not cartoon characters. It is estimated that 1% of the general population are psychopaths, and it is estimated that 25% of all prisoners are psychopaths. I want to enumerate the observed characteristics that psychopaths display because, Officer Ross, I think that would be better if you did it yourself. My mother was a feral psychopath. She was born into extreme poverty. I think she lived long enough to outgrow her psychopathy. I think all human beings are born as feral psychopaths. And those of us who are fortunate enough not to be born into criminally impoverished conditions generally outgrow our pathological selfishness if we live long enough. Officer Ross, you have shown the world what a psychopath looks like. Never again, never again, never again. The good news is that I think psychopathy can be overcome. And Officer Ross, although I know down to my DNA that you would never have the courage to do this, if you can make a public confession and say that you lost your mind for a moment, you could go a long way toward helping your fellow Americans in particular and humanity in general.